This is Janet Diane Moya Swerdlow with another news podcast for the first full week in October and also the week of our annual conference, Hidden Histories and Mysteries Digging Deeper. So with that said, I hope all of you are planning on coming because we have some fantastic news for you. We have a lot of things that Stewart has found out on his travels over this past year. We will be discussing clear energy. We will have Steve Spirason speaking about the Magdalene frequency and ISIS. And we will also have Gary the Numbers Guy, who will be talking about numbers hidden in plain sight by the Illuminati global handlers, and he will talk about the financial collapse and, most importantly, financial recovery. So this is going to be a very important seminar, and I am looking forward, or conference I should say rather than seminar, and I look forward to all of you coming and meeting many of you from around the world who I've only met on paper but never in person, so it's going to be exciting. Plus a fantastic opportunity for you all to connect with each other. And of course, we want to remember that producer-director Christopher Garetano will be there showing his Montauk Chronicles movie, and you will have the opportunity to speak directly with Christopher and Stewart as well as watch the movie with them. So it's going to be a very exciting weekend. I'm looking forward to it. Now, on to the news. I have some very interesting stories as always, and they get more bizarre and more weird, but what's really interesting is to watch the pattern of what's happening in the world and watch the net being closed in on the unsuspecting masses. So thank goodness you have an open mind and you're willing to look at some of these trends and what's happening so you do not get caught up in what's happening out there in the outer world. I'm going to start with China, because I found this particularly interesting, that China is vowing to forgive billions of development dollars of debt. Now, why I find that interesting is because we've been talking that this is a Shemitah year, and every 7 years the debts are supposed to be forgiven. And so I'm not going to go into the article itself because it's a lengthy article. If you want to read it, the link will be posted. But if you haven't seen our prophecy webinar on the Shemitah, this is what I want to invite you to do, because I want to know if this is why China is doing what it's doing. So watch that webinar on prophecy. Very interesting on the Shemitah year. Now here's another interesting story about ISIS. According to a German journalist, Jürgen Totenhofer, who spent 10 days living with ISIS, he claims that ISIS is planning a nuclear holocaust to wipe hundreds of millions from the face of the earth. He wrote about his experiences with the terror group in a new book, and remember, this is after 10 days, which I find a little odd, but anyway, he said that they want to impose an Islamic caliphate across the entire globe. Now, to me, that part of it's not so interesting. I'll tell you what's so interesting about it. It's the reporter's name. The reporter's name, last name, Totenhofer, in German actually means death station. So again, it's all hidden in plain sight, but you've got to know what to look for. And then following on that, we have Mr. Trump, who is defending the Second Amendment, even following the Oregon shootings. And Trump said in a rally in suburban Nashville that he has a handgun carry permit in New York. He also claimed that because better mental health care would help curb future shootings, but many states and cities are closing their mental health care facilities, that we have to start looking into stronger mental health, which of course I agree with that, simply because of all the mass programming that's going on out there, as well as specific programming. Now, Trump warns, quote, "No matter what you do, you will always have problems, and it doesn't make sense to limit firearms." And he says, quote, "It's not the guns, it's the people, it's these sick people." And we see killings with knives, and we see killings with all kinds of things. So we can't confiscate the knives and everything else, but like we've talked about, they're trying to take away the guns. Now, so this continues to be interesting. It says that while he now touts the National Rifle Association line, he once backed the ban on assault weapons and longer waiting periods for gun purchases. And now he's saying, "I'm a very, very big Second Amendment person. This is about self-defense, plain and simple," unquote. Now, as you know, all of the people who are running for office, they have a platform and they want you to get behind them, because regardless of who wins, if everybody says, oh, well, you know, it was a fair fight, so to speak, they're going to kind of let it go. So right now, he's setting himself up to be the spokesperson for those people who don't believe in gun control. And pretty soon somebody will show up who's a spokesperson for gun control. So then you feel like you have a team and you have somebody to play on, so it really diffuses the personal energy within everybody. So again, you know, of course, they're very smart, and I want to remind you, of course, that Trump and Hillary are cousins via the Queen, and whoever wins is going to be related, most likely, to the royal family. And somebody else was pointing out that Jeb Bush is kind of in the background, and that Trump has talked about what a nice guy Jeb Bush is, and if Jeb Bush happens to make it in as president, he will be the third Bush, and there's going to be a lot of significance in that as well, simply because of that number 3, which we all know the Illuminati use. We talk about it as being the number of perfection. We talk about it as being representative of conscious, subconscious, superconscious, and I'm sure Gary the Numbers guy will have his take on it when he presents this coming Sunday at our fall conference. Now, the Weather Channel in Fairbanks, Alaska, interestingly enough, reports that officially there were 6.7 inches of snow in the city of Fairbanks on the autumn equinox. So this was the city's 3rd heaviest calendar day of snow, one in 1992 and one in 1972. Does not sound like global warming. So wanted to put that out there. I have also been discussing to you about the false flag that are going on out there, and we talked last week, I believe it was, for a few weeks about the Confederate flag in the South, and I talked to you a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago even, about a veteran who had to take his flag down. And of course, he was putting things out there for people to fly your flag or fly any kind of flag. Well, now we have another flag in Utah. Homeowners in Murray, Utah say they're being fined by their homeowners association for flying the American flag. Apparently, Chestnut Place is a condominium community consisting of about 60 homeowners, and up until last week they could fly their flag whenever that they wanted to. Now they're being fined up to $75 because the homeowners association says, quote, all exterior decorations must be removed within 10 days following the holiday. Please remove your flag from the common area. Now, this one homeowner says she was shocked at the language because she says, quote, the flag is not a holiday decoration. People have died for that. It is not a holiday decoration. The president of the Homeowners Association says that she's steadfast in her decision to enforce the fine because she's tired of seeing flags, not just the American flag, flying up and down the street all day and night, 365 days of the year. She says flags are flown only on holiday events. All we are trying to do is regulate when the flag goes up and when the flag goes down. So again, I think all of this has to do with programming. Continue to watch for more people getting upset about what's going on with the flag, because you attack the Declaration of Independence, you attack the Constitution, you attack the flag, you attack guns and our right to defend ourselves, and you're going to get people very, very upset. And we talked about this continuing to lead most likely toward a civil war. Now, on to another topic. Self-driving taxis are hitting the road in Japan very soon. There is a company in Japan called Robot Taxi, and apparently they are putting their self-driving taxis on the streets in 2016. Apparently they want to get these fully functional by 2020, when Japan will officially host the Olympic Games. Now, there's also apparently a new robot hotel where there is a receptionist dinosaur robot who performs the check-in services, and apparently this hotel also has checkout porters, robots that take luggages up to your room, and they're claiming that it's to save labor costs. But I think it's also another test of what they want to do with people and their responses to interacting with robots. And Saturn, moving to outer space. What is stirring within Saturn? Strange spiraling ripples in the gas giant's rings are revealing the planet's internal structure. And scientists are studying these strange waves that are moving through Saturn's rings because the unusual pattern suggests that something is spinning deep inside the planet. Now, according to what Stewart and I have been telling you for many years now, Saturn is on its way to becoming a second sun. So continue to watch Saturn and hear what they have to say about that. Scientists in Russia, who is the head of geocryology department at Moscow State University, has now saying that perhaps he has found the secret to eternal life, because there is a bacteria that he found, or I guess they've been studying for some time, in the permafrost in Siberia that is 3.5 million years old, and apparently they have unlocked its DNA. It's called Bacillus F. They're testing it on mice and human cells. Well, this scientist decided to inject it into himself, and he claims he's stronger and healthier than before. Now, apparently he did this about 2 years ago. He said, I started to work longer, and I've never had the flu for the past 2 years. Well, you know what? I work long days too, and I haven't had the flu in a lot longer than 2 years. I can't even tell you when. So I can't say that this bacteria is helping or not helping, and I don't see how, as a scientist, he can say that. He claims he has no idea what the bacteria is doing to him, but he says we do not know exactly how it works. We don't even know how an aspirin works, but we just know that it does. So again, they're putting forward this idea of immortality, and as I have talked to you about, mortality happens to, the way that they're talking about it, drive you into the animal mind and does not allow the soul and the spirit to grow on in the same way. So continue watching that story. Now, some of you may have seen Matt Damon's movie, The Martian. Apparently, this coincided with the NASA scientists making their announcement that yes, there is water on Mars. Now, of course, again, Stewart and I have told you this for a lot of years, but the red planet continues to be in the news and will stay in the news for a long time. So let's see what else happens. And there is a rare sofa shark that showed up and an unusual catch off the coast of Scotland. Now, what's so unusual about that? Because it does not usually seen in these waters. And so what I want you to continue to keep in mind is all the unusual sea animals that are appearing in unusual places, and that tells us that something is going on underwater. So continue to watch the sea for clues. You may have also heard about a surgeon that recently, this was in Australia, reattached a toddler's head to its neck following a near-death car accident. Apparently, this 16-month-old child was riding in the car with his mother and a brother when it was hit so forcefully by another person at 70 miles per hour that it caused an internal decapitation, which meant that his head basically became removed from his neck inside. He was airlifted from the crash site to a hospital in Queensland on the eastern coast of Australia, and surgeons took a 6-hour procedure to save the toddler's life. Dr. Jeff Askin, who's known as Australia's godfather of spinal surgery, said that he attached a halo device to his skull to hold it in place. They used a piece of wire, a piece of the child's rib to graft 2 vertebrae together. And he says that a lot of children would not have survived that injury in the first place. And if they did, they might never move or breathe again. But he is expected to make a full recovery. And apparently this was the worst condition that this godfather of spinal surgery has ever seen. Now, this reminds me of the Russian man that I've been telling you about, who is scheduled in 2017 to have the first head transplant by an Italian surgeon, which I've discussed with you before. So this again is getting us ready for head transplants, and of course we do want a small child to survive, and the next thing that's going to happen, we'll see what phase 2 is. Speaking of programming, there is a woman named Jewel Shuping you might have read about, who claims that she's happier than ever because she has fulfilled her lifelong dream of becoming blind. Yes, you heard me correctly. I myself had to read this first paragraph more than once. Anyway, apparently this 30-year-old woman suffers from body integrity identity disorder, BIID. It's a condition where able-bodied sufferers believe they were meant to be disabled. And we have talked to you about this before, about people who have wanted their limbs amputated and all kinds of things. This is programming. Plain and simple, it's programming. By the time I was 6, I remember that thinking about being blind made me feel comfortable. Then she began wearing thick black sunglasses as a teenager. This reminds me of the woman that we talked to you about who wanted to be black, and who wound up heading a chapter of the NCAAP when she was white. But now this woman wants to be blind. So you can be whatever you want, right? So when she was 18, she purchased her first cane. By 20, the North Carolina woman was fluent in Braille. Now listen to this. At 26, she found a psychologist who was willing to help her fulfill her dream. She apparently went through 2 weeks of counseling, which is nothing when you've had a lifelong issue like that. And then she says the doctor put numbing drops in her eyes, followed by drops of drain cleaner. Now, first of all, I want to know what kind of morality would a psychologist like this have who would do it, and why isn't he in jail? Why isn't he being prosecuted? Why isn't his license being taken away? This is the only reference that's made to this. She says, quote, "It hurt, let me tell you. My eyes were screaming and I had some drain cleaner going down my cheek, burning my skin. But all I could think about was, I'm going blind, it's going to be okay." After a year, apparently one of her eyes had to be removed and the other one was suffering with glaucoma and cataracts. So she is officially blind. And she says she's encouraging people who suffer from BIID to seek professional help. And I'm going to say why? So they can find these rogue doctors who will do these things to them and experiment on them. You know, I don't think so. Something else is going on here, and I think it's terrible. Now, there is also a town, which I found this one interesting, in the Dominican Republic, where girls who are born in a particular village may not grow up as biological females after all. Now, in the book that Stewart and I wrote, called The True Reality of Sexuality, we wrote about people who are born, and they're more than you think, where their genitalia does not fit what the average person thinks it should. In fact, doctors don't know if they are male or female, even after they do a chromosome study on them. So this is called the intersex people, and so this is a little bit different than that. But I want you to understand that there are biological anomalies that do exist within nature that we're generally not aware of. Anyway, in this particular town, it says a little more than 1% of the girls develop a penis at age 12. And these are called by the locals guevedotes, which literally means a penis at 12. One of the guevedotes, named Johnny, said he remembers when I used to wear a dress. They didn't know what sex I was. I went to school, I used to wear my skirt. When they brought me girls' toys, I never bothered playing with them. All I wanted to do was play with the boys. It turns out that Johnny was suffering from an unusual genetic disorder caused by a missing enzyme, which stops a powerful male sex hormone from surging into wombs that carry the male Y chromosome. So apparently that normally happens at 8 weeks, which turns the bump between their legs into a penis. Well, anyway, apparently around puberty, there is a blast of this hormone again, whereas these females then actually grow a penis. And these children, it says, may be teased at school, but they are generally celebrated by the Dominicans. And then it talks about a village in Papua New Guinea that shun people with the disorder. So it says, despite less facial hair and smaller prostate glands, these once females, now turned male, generally live as normal males. But however, some of them get an operation to stay female. So I just think, again, this is interesting when we look at the anomalies that are out there by nature. These aren't people that are truly born this way and that have issues that are based upon their genetics versus programming that is really inherent in society. So we really have to be careful before we follow these transgender trends and everything else that's going on about sexuality, which is really messing up people where they don't know what they are. These are people that have genetic issues that it can be proven. And the same if you read our book, True Reality of Sexuality, we also talk about the intersex people. Now here's another one for you. Demi Lovato, who poses nude and makeup-free for Vanity Fair. Okay, first of all, I don't believe that these people who are public icons ever pose makeup-free, and I don't believe that they ever pose without some kind of photoshopping going on. However, that's what they're claiming with this one. And she's saying because she had body identity issues different from the other person, she had eating disorders and whatnot, and now she feels comfortable in her own skin, so it's so wonderful and she feels so confident, she's showing you everything. Now, I've told you this before. Confidence comes from inside, not from getting naked in front of everybody. It has nothing to do with it. So you need to think about what you're being imprinted with. She says, quote, I basically went from hating every single inch of my body to working on myself and trying to figure out ways to love myself and love the skin that I'm in. I learned after working very hard on my spirituality and my soul and my body, she's got to tie that in there for you. I learned that you can get to a place where you love the skin that you're in, and I'm excited to share that with the world. I want to show the side of me that's real, that's liberated, that's free. What if we do a photo shoot where it's totally raw, super sexy, no makeup, no fancy lighting, no retouching, no clothing? Let's do it here, let's do it now, unquote. So I'm telling you, this every time you turn around, there's some public icon now who's showing you all their skin and saying it's so wonderful, it's liberating, this is because they're self-confident. No, your self-confidence comes from within. Doesn't matter what you're wearing, what you're not wearing, what your body shape is. Your self-confidence comes from within. Do your hyperspace oversoul work and figure out who and what you are. Quit listening to the programming out there because it's just going to get even more asinine, which I'm going to tell you about next. Miley Cyrus, as you know, she's a huge public icon out there with a lot of programming going on. And they actually were showing in a Jimmy Fallon show about how programming works. I thought it was exceptionally interesting. So if you have a chance, use your round merger archetype at your pineal and then take a look at this clip. Because Jimmy Fallon was interviewing Miley Cyrus over a conversation, and the idea of the conversation, which they announced, was they would change their emotions based on what they saw on the screen. So what did they do? They had a ding. That's a notice that your alters are changing, a ding. And even people who do finger snapping, a lot of finger snapping, that's reprogramming themselves. So if you do that or know somebody that does, observe. Anyway, so they hear a ding, and then it would talk about a different emotion. So each one of them would go into basically a different alter. Now, Miley was wearing a bright yellow outfit. And of course, bright yellow has to do with programming. And in one of it, she even put on the bunny ears with a veil over her face. So again, more programming, animal alters coming out. So every time the ding went on, they changed. Sad, happy, defensive, aggressive, and so forth. Watch it. But it's interesting that how they're showing you that as this programming is happening and what happens to people and how you can flip from alter to alter to alter. And remember, these people are actors and actresses, and they're trained this way, and that also is a way to get them into alters. It's not what you think there, it's not real. Now, I've also been talking to you about how that they are putting the astral level forward and trying to make that real for you and making it acceptable. And those of you who follow us on Facebook, you might have seen the bits of the section of the article that I wrote a couple years ago on what is the astral realm. We've been posting those on Facebook, and of course that article is on the free side of our website, expansions.com. It's very interesting, and it will help keep you safe if you read it. Anyway, there's a mother, a 21-year-old mother, who was given a gift of a 4D scan of her unborn baby as a gift. Well, that sounds innocent enough, correct? But when they got the scan back, there was a profile of her late grandfather in the images, and the grandfather appears to be kissing the daughter's unborn baby in the photos. It's really spooky, she says. It looks just like him. You can see him more clearly than my daughter. The lips are puckering up as if he's about to kiss her cheek. You can make out the eyes, nose, and mouth clearly. Apparently the grandfather had died in 2007, and so yes, you can see all of that, so I invite you to take a look, because they're showing more and more of these kinds of pictures, and you're going to continue to see more because, as we've talked about, they're imprinting you that it's all okay and it's all wonderful. So keep your eyes and ears open. And then my very last story, which is near and dear to my heart, has to do with Michigan. This actually isn't that far from where we live. It is actually west of Ann Arbor, which is west of Detroit. There is a farmer who was digging up in his field and came across some woolly mammoth bones. Now, University of Michigan professor Daniel Fisher confirmed the find, and apparently he said we get calls like this once or twice a year, but he says usually it's mastodons. It's a bit more unusual to find a mammoth in the group, which is more closely related to modern elephants. So you might want to read that. And there is a lot of very strange activity that happens here in Michigan. Remember, we're on the edge of a vortex. We have the Great Lakes. The land is shaped like a mitten with a lot of water surrounding it. And of course, there's a lot of water usually involved with supernatural, if you want to call it that way. I call it more natural phenomena, but a lot of things happen in Michigan. And you will feel that energy when you are here. Remember, Silver Beach is made up of thousands and hundreds of thousands of tons of crystal. So when we have the copper mines up north, we have the vortex, we have the water. So Michigan is a very, very strange place. So it's no wonder that Stewart and I are here. So with that said, I want to thank you for joining me. I want you, again, think about your mind, what's going out there. Be sure you use that Brown Merger archetype. You might want to watch that prophecy webinar to find out what's going on in the Shemitah year. We're going to have a fantastic seminar or conference coming up here in just a few days with people coming in from all over the world to learn about hidden mysteries and hidden histories and digging deeper. And Stewart and I will be presenting on clear energy, how to keep yourself safe. You're going to learn about what's going on out there because of what's going on inside and how you can stay safe. And no matter what happens out there, you don't have to participate unless you choose. So thank you very much for joining me, Janet Diane Moria Swerdlow, another Expansions News podcast specifically designed for you. Bye-bye now.